Why do you still feel guilty for choosing yourself even after all you've given? You didn't choose to be the good one, you adapted. Not because you were more virtuous, more disciplined, or more mature than other children, but because the emotional environment around you demanded it. In emotionally volatile or narcissistic systems, survival rarely comes through honesty, it comes through compliance. Some children cry for help, others rebel. You disappeared. You became the one who didn't ask for too much, didn't burden others, didn't speak when it was inconvenient. And over time, you forgot it was ever a performance. You began to believe it was your nature. To be agreeable, helpful, quiet, reliable, emotionally clean. What you learned was simple, even if unspoken. Love was not freely given, it was earned. And only those who didn't disrupt the emotional balance of the household were allowed to receive it. Many adults live inside this identity long after the original threat has passed. They still monitor everyone else's emotional weather. They still apologize for needing space. They still feel a low-grade guilt for simply existing on their own terms. This conditioning is subtle, but its consequences are profound. You may find yourself unable to relax around others, feeling the compulsion to serve, to please, to anticipate every possible disruption. You might overanalyze a simple boundary you've set, wondering if you've hurt someone by just being honest. You may hesitate to assert your needs, not because they are unreasonable, but because you've been conditioned to believe your needs are dangerous. Imagine this: a child who comforts their mother instead of the other way around, who smiles to diffuse tension, who tries not to cry so they don't add to the chaos. That child becomes the adult who apologizes before speaking, who downplays their success, who interprets inner peace as selfishness. And the worst part? They often have no idea that this goodness was manufactured, that it was created not from authenticity, but from necessity. What if your entire identity was a mask you were praised for wearing? What if your deepest wounds were disguised as virtues? You didn't become good because it was noble. You became good because it was the only way to stay connected. In a household where love was conditional, the child is forced into an emotional contract, one that says, "If I am good, I will be safe." But what does good mean in this context? It means quiet, emotionally invisible. It means self-sacrificing, self-erasing, endlessly adaptive. You absorbed the moods of others, adjusted your behavior preemptively, and smiled through discomfort. Not because you wanted to, but because somewhere, unconsciously, you understood authenticity comes with punishment, and compliance comes with approval. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And for the good child, this terror begins early, because the self you were asked to abandon was the self most in need of love. Inconsistency from parents, especially those who were emotionally immature, narcissistic, or enmeshed, teaches you that love is not a right, it is a performance. You only matter when you're meeting needs that are not your own. So you developed hyper-attunement. You read every room, every face, every sigh. And somewhere inside, you began to equate stillness with danger and pleasing with peace. This isn't about blaming parents. This is about understanding the conditions under which your personality was shaped, and how your sense of goodness was built on fear, not freedom. You learned that your presence was only welcome when it was convenient for others. So you became invisible to survive. You erased your needs, repressed your anger, muted your preferences. You showed up to be liked, not to be known. And for a while, it worked. You were praised, admired, trusted, but not seen. Approval became your safety, and to keep it, you became hyper-reliable, emotionally stable, always helpful. But what they called maturity was often a mask. What they admired was your silence, your control, your self-sacrifice. You internalized that asking for anything, space, comfort, protection, was selfish, that expressing your pain was dangerous, that needing someone would cost you the little love you had. This creates emotional exhaustion that mimics depression. It forms an identity where burnout is your baseline and emotional numbness feels like peace. It's not. It's the freeze response of a nervous system trained to tolerate everything. But over time, this erasure costs more than your energy. It fractures your relationship to yourself. When your life is built around being acceptable, your truth begins to rot in the basement of your psyche. Your relationships feel lonely, even when they look harmonious, because no one actually knows you, not even yourself. Carl Jung taught the psyche cannot tolerate prolonged disintegration without symptoms. What begins as self-denial transforms into low-level resentment, passive guilt, and chronic confusion. You begin to distrust your emotions. You ask, "Why do I feel this way?" when there's nothing outwardly wrong. But your psyche knows you've spent too long pretending. The good child becomes an adult who apologizes before speaking, who over-explains boundaries, who feels guilty for resting, who is haunted by the feeling that something's wrong, even when everything looks right. You survived by disappearing, but now you wonder why no one sees you, and perhaps more importantly, why you can no longer see yourself. Carl Jung described the persona as the social mask we wear to function in society. He wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." The good child's persona is not accidental. It is engineered for survival. It looks like politeness, kindness, humility, but underneath it often hides anger, fear, confusion, and grief. You were trained to be who others needed you to be, not who you actually were. The problem is not the mask itself. We all have one. The problem is forgetting that you're wearing it. When you spend too long performing goodness, you begin to mistake the act for the self. You over-identify with being calm, giving, capable, and you disconnect from your instincts, emotions, and desires. This over-identification creates emotional distortion. You feel guilt when resting, shame when saying no, anxiety when asserting yourself. It also creates confusion in relationships. You attract those who love the mask, but not the reality. And when you finally express your truth, they call you difficult, selfish, or changed. But the truth is, you're not changing, you're remembering. The persona protects you from rejection, but it also isolates you from authenticity, from intimacy, from your actual life. The reason the good child is always the most emotionally abused is because their pain is invisible, disguised as politeness, hidden beneath responsibility, celebrated as sacrifice. But now you see it. You were never broken, only split. Never unloved, only unseen. And now you choose wholeness, truth, awareness. But what does wholeness look like in daily life? It looks like pausing before saying yes and asking, "Do I actually want this?" It looks like sitting with discomfort rather than fixing everyone else's. It means risking disapproval to honor your own boundaries. It means letting people misunderstand you because being true is more important than being liked. Wholeness is not loud, it's steady. It doesn't perform, it simply is. You're not here to be good, you're here to become yourself. Carl Jung often described the psyche as an energy system. Like electricity, psychic energy flows toward whatever demands the most attention, whether consciously or unconsciously. And for the good child, that energy is constantly spent on one thing: maintaining the illusion of peace. You spent your entire life scanning for disruptions, emotionally triangulating, smoothing over conflicts before they even surface, anticipating needs before they're spoken. But that kind of vigilance comes at a cost. This is why you feel depleted even when nothing dramatic has happened, why a small request can feel overwhelming, why you collapse in silence after socializing, unable to explain the exhaustion. Your system is not lazy, it's overloaded. When every interaction is filtered through the question, "How do I not disappoint?" psychic energy drains from the core of your being. And because the performance is unconscious, you don't realize how much you're spending until you crash. Jung emphasized that what we suppress doesn't disappear. It simply finds another channel. And the constant repression of true self-expression, of anger, sadness, or simply saying, "I don't want to," leads to chronic fatigue, emotional numbness, or mysterious burnout. It's not that you're incapable, it's that your energy is constantly bleeding into managing other people's emotions. You've become a reservoir for everyone else's discomfort, and now you're empty. Every smile that wasn't real, every boundary you didn't set, every moment you said yes but meant no, cost you something invisible. Not just time or effort, but energy, life force, selfhood. And over time, your sense of vitality becomes conditional. You feel alive only when you're useful, valuable only when you're self-sacrificing. But the soul doesn't want to be useful. It wants to be free. What would happen if you stopped performing? What if your exhaustion wasn't a weakness, but a signal that the psychic cost of being good is no longer sustainable? You stop responding. You stop showing up. You find yourself uninterested in conversations you used to tolerate, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You begin to feel numb to people's expectations, and guilty about that numbness. This isn't failure, it's awakening. In psychoanalysis, this shift is known as regression, a necessary psychological movement where the psyche withdraws from external adaptation and returns inward to reorganize. You are not breaking down, you are breaking away. Your nervous system, once hyper-alert and fused with responsibility, is now demanding silence, rest, separation. It's no longer sustainable to be emotionally available to everyone all the time. So you retreat, maybe slowly, maybe all at once. But it's not because you've lost compassion. It's because you've remembered you have a self. And that self no longer wants to exist only in relation to other people's needs. Withdrawal doesn't mean isolation. It means returning to yourself after years of exile. It means letting go of roles that kept you alive, but now keep you numb. And in that retreat, something sacred begins to emerge. Not the version of you they raised, but the version of you that's finally waking up. As the performance fades, silence enters. Not a silence of loneliness, but of clarity. You stop over-explaining. You stop rescuing. You stop offering yourself to situations that only deplete you. What changes isn't your love, it's your threshold for self-abandonment. You no longer ask, "How do I fix this?" Instead, you ask, "Is this mine to carry?" Emotional detachment is not coldness. It's the recovery of psychic energy. It's the ability to observe without absorbing, to care without collapsing. Carl Jung taught that differentiation, the process of becoming yourself, requires boundaries. And boundaries begin with one sentence: "That's not mine." That guilt you feel for not responding fast enough? Not yours. That pressure to meet unspoken expectations? Not yours. That ache to be liked by people who don't really see you? Not yours. What's yours is your energy, your presence, your time, your truth. And now you begin protecting it, not with anger, but with awareness. Detachment is not withdrawal from love, it's withdrawal from distortion. You no longer confuse self-sacrifice with connection. You now recognize true connection never costs you your center. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming the self, the integrated, undivided whole of who you truly are. He wrote, "Individuation means becoming one's own self. We must give up being good to become whole." For the good child, this can feel like heresy. You were trained to be easy, predictable, admirable. But individuation doesn't care about admiration. It cares about authenticity. It's the moment when you stop trying to be palatable and start trying to be real. Individuation asks you to reclaim the parts of yourself that were exiled: your anger, your wildness, your desire, your grief. It asks you to stop polishing your image and start listening to your instincts. It's not a path of rebellion, it's a path of reclamation. No longer do you act out of guilt. No longer do you edit your emotions. You allow yourself to be what you are, even when it doesn't fit the script. This is not about becoming unkind. It's about becoming honest. And through that honesty, a different kind of peace emerges. Not the peace of compliance, but the peace of alignment. You realize being real is riskier than being good, but it's also the only thing that feels alive. The good child was never truly loved, only praised. Not for who they were, but for how well they performed. And that's the deepest wound. Not that you were mistreated, but that your true self was never met. Now you stand at the edge of an old identity. You've seen how the need to be good has cost you presence, energy, and connection. You've seen how your silence protected others, but imprisoned you. And now you make a different choice. Not the loud defiance of rebellion, but the quiet return of wholeness. It looks like honesty that doesn't tremble. It looks like boundaries that don't apologize. It looks like resting without guilt, loving without losing yourself, walking away without collapsing. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." So you let go of the role, you release the mask, and you walk not toward perfection, but toward truth. Not to be good, but to be whole.